war is spreading. The US is striking Iranian assets in Syria. Houthis in Yemen have shot down an American drone, and the Mossad has helped Brazil foil an attack. Meanwhile, South Africa is calling for the arrest of Netanyahu for war crimes. And Israel is accusing the Western press of being embedded with terrorists. There's a lot to unpack as the war completes 34 days. In the US, Donald Trump skipped and dominated yet another presidential debate, which makes us wonder what's the point of these Republican debates. In Myanmar, the junta says the new rebellion may split the country. We'll tell you why this is a worry for India. In Pakistan, the government is blaming the Taliban for the deportation of Afghans. We'll explain why. Also tracking the forgotten war in the Sudan, how Japan has got the world's newest island, and why Delhi's belated attempts to curb pollution are bogus. All this and more coming up. The headlines first. Maldives President-elect Mohammad Muizzu invites Indian Prime Minister Narendra Modi for his swearing-in ceremony. India is yet to agree, says it hasn't decided who will represent New Delhi at the event. Muizzu fought on an India out plank, and he wants to expel Indian troops from Mali. France blames Russia for the rise in anti-Semitic graffiti in Paris. Stars of David were painted on building walls, similar to the time when Nazis occupied Paris. Moscow has rubbished the accusations, calling them undignified. There's a flurry of diplomatic activity in Central Asia. Russian President Vladimir Putin is in Kazakhstan to cement old ties. Meanwhile, Turkish, Iranian and Pakistani leaders are visiting Uzbekistan for a regional economic summit. South Korea declares a war on bed bugs. The country has reported multiple incidents of bed bug infestations. Bathhouses, university dorms and train stations are now on high alert. Popular live video website Omegle shuts down after 14 years. It allowed users to chat with strangers on the platform. The site has been shut down after multiple claims of abuse and pedophilia. And Hollywood finally has a deal. Actors' union SAG-AFTRA signs tentative deal with studios to end a 4-month-long strike. The deal will impact streaming and the use of AI in Hollywood films. It's day 34 of Israel's offensive. Slowly, the United States is getting dragged in. American assets are under attack. At least 40 of them have been reported in the last few weeks. 40 attacks on US bases. So what is Washington doing? Well, they're hitting back. On Wednesday night, they carried out an airstrike. The target was in eastern Syria. The US says it was a weapons warehouse, one used by Iran-backed militants in this region. So 2 F-15 fighter jets were scrambled. They dropped multiple bombs on the target. And casualties? The US says none. Only the warehouse and the weapons were destroyed. Now, this was not America's first attack. A similar one was carried out last month as well. Again, the target was in Syria, a weapons cache used by Iranian guards. The idea behind these attacks is to deter Iranian proxies, to keep them at bay. But is it working? Well, yes and no. None of the proxies have launched an all-out assault. I guess that's a positive. But sporadic attacks have been carried out, one of them near Yemen. The Houthi rebels have shot down a US drone. It was an MQ-9 Reaper. It was downed off the coast of Yemen. Now, the MQ-9 is a surveillance drone. Its job is to collect intelligence. Each drone costs around $30 million. So things are on the edge right now. Iranian proxies are willing to strike US assets, and the US is more than willing to hit back. The question is, will this escalate further? And that depends on the offensive in Gaza. Israeli troops have reached the heart of Gaza City. This is where things can get tricky. We're talking about street-to-street fighting, close range, urban setting, so no room for mistakes. If you're wondering what that looks like, the Hamas has released some footage. They say it shows urban warfare with the IDF. Take a look. Just to be clear, that was unverified footage, but it does tell you how dangerous urban warfare is. So what is the IDF's plan to tackle it? Their first target seems to be the tunnels. Hamas has built a vast network of tunnels. They can be used to launch surprise attacks. So the IDF is blowing up these tunnels. Take a look. Along with ground attacks, there are airstrikes too. At least two main cities were targeted, Khan Yunis in the south and Gaza City in the north. In Gaza City, the target was a hospital, Al-Shifa. It's the largest hospital in the Strip, and right now it's treating thousands of Gazans. What explains these non-stop airstrikes? After all, the IDF has already besieged Gaza City. Well, the idea is to drive out people. Israel wants civilians to flee northern Gaza. No civilians, no collateral. That's the idea. It makes their ground assault much easier. So the IDF has opened a key road out of Gaza City. Hundreds of Gazans have begun fleeing, some on donkey carts, others on foot. The IDF says around 50,000 people have fled south.
They are moving because they understand that Hamas has lost control in the north and that the south is safer. A safer area where they receive medicine, water and food. They understand it's an improvement.
Staying put is dangerous, but many Gazans do not have an option. Some of them are injured, so they cannot travel. Others don't have the means. Plus, the United Nations says it will not really help. Their officials say there is no safe zone in the south. It's a plan by Israel to forcibly displace Gazans. So the United Nations wants to have no part in it. And they've got a point here. Around 30% of all casualties are in the south, so southern Gaza is not exactly safe. But staying in the north is nothing short of a death sentence. Israel struck the city of Beit Lahia yesterday. Take a look at the aftermath. It is heartbreaking. Gaza's death toll has crossed 10,500. Among them are more than 4,300 children. The United Nations is calling it children's graveyard, which makes you wonder, is anyone talking about peace? Well, world leaders are meeting in Paris. President Emmanuel Macron is hosting a humanitarian conference. He says there must be a pause quickly.
Today, the situation is grave and is getting worse each day. In the short term, we should work on protecting civilians, and to do so, we need a humanitarian pause very quickly. And we have to strive for a ceasefire. This should become a possibility.
Pauses are possible. Even Israel has agreed to it on paper. But a ceasefire? Well, that could be tougher. Reports say diplomats are negotiating hard. There is talk of a 1 to 3 day ceasefire. In exchange, Hamas could release hostages, including women and children. But nothing is official yet. Israel has ruled out a ceasefire until all hostages are returned. Hamas has said the opposite. Stop the war and then get your hostages. That's what they say. Now, we can only hope that there is progress, and fast progress, because the longer this drags out, the greater the spillover risk. We've mentioned the threat in West Asia, but turns out it could be much wider. Brazilian officials have arrested 2 suspects in Sao Paulo. They're accused of plotting terror attacks. Apparently, Israel tipped them off. Their spy agency, Mossad, has released a statement. They say the suspects are linked to a Hezbollah cell. They wanted to strike Israeli and Jewish targets in Brazil, all the way in Brazil. If confirmed, this is massive. It shows the risks are not just limited to West Asia, it could be felt thousands of kilometers away. As the conflict escalates, the role of the press is also under scrutiny, especially the Western press. Israel is slamming their role. They've named 4 prominent platforms: CNN, the New York Times, Reuters, and AP, Associated Press. The Israeli government has some tough questions for them. Questions like, are their reporters embedded with Hamas? Did they have prior knowledge about the attacks on Israel? Were they tipped off by Hamas terrorists? And were they cooperating with them? Now, these are very serious questions and charges. And they're being raised on the basis of some photos. Photos released by a media watchdog in Israel. These are from the October 7 attacks. Take a look at what they have. The first picture is from Associated Press or AP. It is a shot of a burning tank. A tank belonging to the Israeli forces. And where was the picture taken? Near the Israel-Gaza border, inside Israeli territory. Now remember, this is an attack that took everyone by surprise. Hamas terrorists broke the border fence, they went inside Israel and they attacked an Israeli tank. The IDF was caught completely off guard, their soldiers were nowhere to be seen, it took them hours to get there. But guess who was present at the site? The Associated Press. In fact, they were so close that they managed to get a close-up, almost as if they were with the terrorists when they infiltrated Israel. And there are more such photos, like this one, again from the AP. The people you see are said to be infiltrators, trying to get inside Kibbutz Kfar Aza, the site of one of the worst attacks by Hamas. Israel says the terrorists carried out a massacre at this kibbutz, killing at least 1,000 people. This could be the moment when they entered the kibbutz. Again, the Associated Press caught it on camera. One name is doing the rounds, Hassan Eslaiya. Reports say he's a freelance journalist from Gaza. He was working with CNN and AP. When Hamas attacked Israel, he happened to be at the scene. Now, this is an unverified video. Apparently, Hassan Eslaiya went live when the attacks were happening.
تم خطف جميع من كان داخل هذه الدبابة، جميع من داخل هذه الدبابة تم خطفهم قبل قليل من قبل عناصر كتائب القسام في هذا المكان كما شاهدنا بالعين المجردة.
And he took more photos, like of these Hamas terrorists. They were near the gate of Kibbutz Kfar Aza. Also this picture of a burning home inside the kibbutz. There is another photo of the same man. It's being shared on social media. This is not from the 7th of October. This is an image, the image I'm talking about. It says, this is Eslaiya with a prominent Hamas leader. So here's the question being asked. When Hamas attacked Israel, did they take journalists along with them? And I use the plural, journalists, because Eslaiya was not alone. There were other journalists like him at the scene. We have some names, in fact. Yusuf Masood, Ali Mahmoud, and Hatem Ali. They took these photos, allegedly of Hamas terrorists kidnapping Israelis. In one picture, they're transporting the body of an Israeli. How did these so-called journalists get there at the right time, and that too almost every time? This cannot be just reporters' luck. There's a pattern here. And for a moment, even if you ignore the timing, look at what they captured. These so-called journalists witnessed mass attacks and kidnappings, killings. They amplified a terror strike. Does this amount to participation in the attack? They took these pictures, and their associates in the Western media carried these pictures. No questions asked, apparently no objections raised. And here's something I'll tell you about wars and conflicts. It's not easy to get inputs, photos, videos, updates. You risk a lot to get them. You rely on all kinds of sources, but you try to operate within ethical boundaries. In this case, those boundaries may have been breached. Israel has officially taken it up. Their communication minister has reached out to all 4 news outlets, CNN, Reuters, the New York Times and AP. Let me quote from what he said. The gravity of the situation demands a swift and thorough response. It is now a time for individuals, journalists, institutions, unions and organizations around the world to make a clear choice. We must decide whether we stand on the side of life and good or on the side of depraved terrorism, inhumanity and evil. That's what the Israeli minister said. AP and Reuters have issued statements since. They say they had no prior knowledge of the Hamas attacks. What about the New York Times and CNN? As of this evening, they had not commented. Now, whichever way this turns out, it raises an important question. At what point do you graduate from being a chronicler to a collaborator? When you see a terrorist attack being launched, do you alert authorities or click pictures? The answer should be obvious, but given what I've just told you, perhaps we should spell it out. The massacre of innocent civilians should be a red flag. In such a case, you should try to be a human first and then a journalist. So I guess everyone's on trial, the army, the media, maybe even the Prime Minister. That's right. South Africa wants Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu to be arrested. They want him charged with war crimes. It's not a surprise, though. South Africa has been firmly pro-Palestine. They have criticized Israel's war. They've also reached out to Hamas. So calling for Netanyahu's arrest was just around the corner. Nonetheless, let's take a closer look at what's happened. Why does South Africa back Palestine? Can Netanyahu really be arrested or charged? And what is the role of our so-called global courts here? Let's start with the first question. South Africa has a lot in common with Palestine, like colonialism and discrimination. So their leaders have always sided with Palestine, even Nelson Mandela. Plus, Israel is seen as a Western proxy in West Asia, sort of like America's right hand. So South Africa has consistently criticized them. Last year, they wanted Israel to be declared an apartheid state. This year, in the month of March, they downgraded relations. South Africa's embassy in Israel became a liaison office. And now diplomats have been recalled.
Why recall our embassy officials? This is normal practice when there's a situation which is causing a great deal of harm and concern to a country, as you would be aware, extremely concerned at the continued killing of children and innocent civilians in the Palestinian territories. And we believe the nature of response by Israel has become one of collective punishment, which falls fully outside of the practice of international humanitarian and international human rights law.
Like I said, not surprising. But is an arrest even possible? South Africa wants the ICC to issue a warrant. That's the International Criminal Court, ICC. Now, the court has no jurisdiction over Israel because they never signed the Rome Statute. But over Palestine, well, the ICC says it does. You see, Palestine got UN observer status in the year 2012. Using that, they joined the ICC. So the court can rule on issues in Palestine, issues related to Palestine, like the attack on civilians, or drone strikes on hospitals, or collective punishment. Of course, Israel and the US reject this. They will most likely ignore any warrant or ruling. Having said that, this whole episode puts the spotlight on the ICC. What have they done so far? In the case of Ukraine, the ICC was quick to act. They issued an arrest warrant for Vladimir Putin. But in Gaza, they've done nothing. And I'm not just talking about holding Israel responsible. I'm talking about Hamas too, because the United Nations says both sides have committed war crimes.
The atrocities perpetrated by Palestinian armed groups on the 7th of October were heinous. They were war crimes, as is the continued holding of hostages. The collective punishment by Israel of Palestinian civilians is also a war crime, as is unlawful, forcible evacuation of civilians.
The ICC has reduced itself to a farce. It has limited jurisdiction, it is not backed by any political will, and it's made questionable decisions, like after the Iraq War. It was clear that US and British troops committed war crimes. Washington never signed the Rome Statute, so their soldiers were off limits, but Britain had signed it. So the ICC began an investigation. They published a 180-page report, 180 pages. They also found evidence of war crimes. But what did they do about it? Absolutely nothing. The ICC decided not to go ahead. At the end of the day, it's always political. The US loved it when the ICC issued a warrant for Vladimir Putin. Would they do the same for Israel? Certainly not. Same for South Africa. They have signed the Rome Statute of the ICC, yet they promised not to arrest Putin if he traveled to their country. So where is the consistency? You want the ICC to arrest Benjamin Netanyahu, yet your own government is not ready to violate the same ICC's order. Also, why not call out the Hamas? Like the United Nations rights chief said, both sides are guilty, but South Africa does not seem to care. Their foreign minister spoke to the Hamas chief on the phone, and that 2 days after the October 7th attack. So you see, it's a case of all-round hypocrisy, of picking and choosing whom to prosecute, which war crimes to chase, and which side to call out. Vantage continues after a short break.
To the idea that it might take, in fact, likely could take, more than one humanitarian pause to get them all out.
Okay.
Thank you.
Appreciate it.
You bet.
Thank you so much.
For a second day in the row, the International Committee of the Red Cross, the ICRC, was able to escort 6 ambulances out of Gaza City and to the Rafah crossing with Egypt, where I'm currently stood. We also entered Gaza with several trucks of vitally needed medical assistance that we planned to donate to different facilities that are in desperate need of medical items, including the Al Quds Hospital, which is managed by the Palestinian Red Crescent, our main partner. The ICRC, due to serious security challenges on the road, which included one of our trucks being impacted and with one of our drivers being injured, was not able to go ahead with the plan as we intended. We were, however, still able to deliver the majority.
Meanwhile, in the US, Donald Trump is racing ahead. In opinion polls, he's doing better than the sitting president. And in the Republican rankings, he beats other presidential hopefuls by a long shot. Trump does not participate in Republican debates, yet he dominates them. The third one took place in Miami. Trump gave it a miss. In fact, he chose to attend a rally just a few kilometers away, which left us with 5 Republicans. They sparred over abortion, economy, even shoes. It made for some good drama. But given Trump's lead, it doesn't really matter. Our next report tells you why.
A battle for the second place doesn't sound too exciting, but that's what the Republican race is all about. America is going to polls in 2024. They already have a Republican favorite. It's Donald Trump. But that hasn't stopped the party from conducting presidential debates. On Wednesday, 5 Republicans took the stage in Miami. It was the third presidential debate. This time, there was more space, both for opinions and on the stage. That's because 2 Republicans have already dropped out, and for those left, There's not much hope. Donald Trump still loomed large over the debate, though he wasn't even there. Trump was in fact at a rally a few kilometers away.
Look where we are now, it's a lot different than we were in 2016. And Donald Trump's a lot different guy than he was in 2016. He owes it to you to be on this stage and explain why he should get another chance.
Tells you how important these debates are. The top candidate isn't even there, and the others are fighting to get close to him. Trump is leading right now by a wide margin, which means these 5 people are running out of chances. The Iowa caucus is just 2 months away. It's the first real contest in the nomination process. So to make a mark, these Republicans have to work hard. And they did try. There were some strong statements, some verbal jostling, and even some name-calling.
In the last debate, she made fun of me for actually joining TikTok while her own daughter was actually using the app for a long time. So you might want to take care of your family first.
Leave my daughter out of your voice.
The next generation of Americans are using it. And that's actually the point. You have her supporters propping her up. That's fine. Here's the truth.
You're just
the easy
scum.
answer is...
Which brings us to the key takeaways from this debate. There was a united front on Israel. All of them talked about defeating Hamas, and they also supported Israel's right to self-defense. But while they were united on Israel, all of the candidates were divided on abortion in this third debate that was hosted by NBC News.
We're better off when everybody counts. We're better off when we can promote a culture of life. At the same time, I understand that some of these states are doing it a little bit different.
Let's talk now about last night's election results. And what I'll tell you is, as much as I'm pro-life, I don't judge anyone for being pro-choice, and I don't want them to judge me for being pro-life.
That said, if we had to choose a winner, it would be Nikki Haley. She's the lone woman in the race. She's been rising in the polls, which explains why she came under attack all night.
Do you want a leader from a different generation who's going to put this country first? Or do you want Dick Cheney in 3-inch heels?
All right, Mr.
In which case we've got 2 of them on stage.
Yes, I'd first like to say they're 5-inch heels, and I don't wear them unless you can run in them.
We've got 2 of you on stage.
The second thing that I will say is I wear heels. They're not for a fashion statement. They're for ammunition.
They're firing hard but may not have much to show for it because Trump remains the leading Republican candidate. He skipped all the debates, and you can't debate someone who isn't there. Which means instead of taking down Trump, the candidates are left to spar among themselves. Which makes you wonder, what's the point of the Republican debates?
Now, here's the thing about military rulers. They never admit defeat. It's always about projecting strength, about showing the people who's in charge, which is why the events in Myanmar have raised eyebrows. Their president convened a meeting today. All his top aides were rounded up. And guess what the president said? He said Myanmar is at risk of breaking apart. Now, you don't hear that every day. A military-appointed president admitting that things are not okay. So what led to this? A civil war. It's not a new problem for the country. Myanmar has been at civil war for almost 7 decades, basically since the Second World War. The fighting is constant. Only the parties change. So who are the warring sides this time? Well, most of the action is here in the Shan state in northern Myanmar. It is bordered by China to the north, Laos to the east, and Thailand to the south. It's full of jungles and hills, the perfect place to carry out an insurgency. 3 ethnic armies are involved this time. They're backed by a number of militant groups. And what do they want? To overthrow the military junta, the military government that took charge in 2021. And guess what? The junta is spooked. The insurgents have made stunning progress in 2 weeks. They've captured 100 military posts. They've taken 4 towns. Also, key roads leading to the China border. Entire army units have surrendered without a fight. Hence the fear. For the first time, the junta in Myanmar is worried. Maybe even on the ropes. It's too early to say who will win, but chances are this will drag on for a long time. So the question is, how will it affect the wider region? How will it affect India? First of all, you have a long border, more than 1,600 kilometers long, India and Myanmar. 4 Indian states border Myanmar: Arunachal Pradesh, Nagaland, Mizoram and Manipur. This border region is a dense jungle. It is home to multiple insurgent groups. Many of them have fought against the Myanmar army. So the worry is they will do it again, and they will use the Shan offensive to attack the junta. If they do, it's a problem for India, because fighting along the border leads to refugees. Consider what happened after the coup 2 years back. Almost 30,000 refugees poured into India. And right now, that's not ideal, especially not in Manipur. The state is dealing with its own conflict. Two ethnic groups are facing off against each other in Manipur, the Kukis and the Meiteis. The violence began in May this year. But even after 6 months, it has not been resolved. And Kukis have allies in Myanmar. So you can imagine why it's a worry. Beyond that, New Delhi and the junta have had a professional relationship, even when Myanmar was a democracy. Whether it's on counterinsurgency or counter-narcotics or border security, we've had a professional relationship. So a civil war would put India in a tough spot. Yes, New Delhi prefers a democratic Myanmar, but constant fighting does not help. And it's not a worry for India alone. All of Myanmar's neighbors will be concerned. If India's worry is security, Southeast Asia's worry is drugs. The Shan state is known for narcotics. At first, it was opium. Nowadays, it's methamphetamine and crystal meth. The insurgent groups are part of this trade. It brings them good money. In fact, Laos has been flooded by these drugs. Meth pills are being sold for $0.25. That's around 20 Indian rupees. So longer war equals more drug sales, because that's the only way to sustain this fighting. Even China is concerned. The Shan rebels are politically supported by Beijing, but a full-blown civil war will hurt them.
We have lodged a solemn protest with the parties concerned. We once again demand that all parties to the conflict in northern Myanmar immediately cease fire and take concrete measures to prevent the recurrence of the situation that harms the Chinese people's lives and property safety in the border areas.
The next few weeks will be crucial. Myanmar's army has air superiority over the insurgents. Going forward, that could be key. But if the last week has proven anything, it's this: the Myanmar junta is not invincible. Now, Myanmar is just one of India's many challenges, arguably not the worst. The contenders for that spot are China and Pakistan. Tonight, we'll tell you about what Pakistan is up to. It's working on a new security nightmare. As we speak, Islamabad is expelling Afghan refugees. Thousands of them have lived in Pakistan for years. They are now being uprooted from their homes and forced to return to Afghanistan. Pakistan's decision has been criticized by the United Nations. The caretaker government is facing international humiliation, and they seem to have found a scapegoat. Pakistan has now blamed the Taliban for the exodus. They say expulsion is a result of Taliban's support to terrorists. It sounds exactly like it is. The pot is calling the kettle black. Pakistan is blaming the Taliban of supporting terrorism, and by doing so, they've shot themselves in the foot. Our next report tells you how.
Pakistan is reaping what it sowed. 2 years ago, Pakistan's then spy chief was seen taking a victory lap in Kabul. The American forces had left the country. The democratic government had collapsed, and the Taliban were back in power. The takeover was a win for Pakistan's generals. You could say they facilitated the Taliban's return. But this celebration did not last long. The Taliban, once beholden to Rawalpindi, are showing that they have a mind of their own. They're asserting themselves. This is Zabihullah Mujahid, the face of the Taliban before the press. This week, Mujahid trained his guns at Islamabad. He issued a strongly worded statement. It declared that Afghanistan is not responsible for maintaining peace in Pakistan, so Islamabad should stop blaming the Taliban. What was the trigger for this? An expulsion order. Islamabad is forcing thousands of Afghans to leave. These are undocumented migrants. 3.8 million Afghans live in Pakistan. Out of these, over 1 million are undocumented. They are now being rounded up in raids. They're being forced to return to Afghanistan. Bulldozers have been pressed into service. This was an Afghan colony outside Islamabad. A few days ago, Pakistani officials demolished every Afghan home here.
Where should we go? Our position is bad in Afghanistan and it is bad here now. I was born here and have spent 40 years here. You tell me, where should I go now? We are helpless.
Their anger is directed towards this man, Anwar ul Haq Kakkad. He is Pakistan's caretaker Prime Minister. When asked about the evictions, he pinned the blame on the Taliban. Kakkad argues the deportations are necessary for Pakistan's security. There has been a sharp increase in terrorist attacks. After the Taliban's return in 2021, terror attacks in Pakistan have spiked by 60%. Suicide bombings have gone up by 500%. One group is driving this surge, Tehreek-e-Taliban Pakistan, or TTP. It pledges allegiance to the Taliban. It gets protection from Kabul. The Taliban's success gave momentum to the TTP. Their attacks became more ambitious. In recent months, they've ramped up strikes on Pakistani soldiers, the ISI, and local police officers. Pakistan demanded action from the Taliban. A ceasefire was mediated, but it did not hold. Finally, Islamabad gave Kabul a choice. It's either us or the TTP. And it seems the Taliban picked the TTP. And the fallout is obvious. Pakistan's ties with the Taliban are deteriorating rapidly. Reports say Islamabad is making a policy shift. It will withdraw all assistance to the Taliban. All special treatment of the Taliban's leaders stands withdrawn. Pakistani diplomats will stop acting as intermediaries between the Taliban and the international community. So the breakup is almost complete. Pakistan's harsh crackdown on Afghans has left the region more volatile. There is chaos at the border. It's the perfect breeding ground for terrorist groups to organize themselves and launch more attacks. Pakistan is reaping what it has sown. But this harvest is also hurting other players in the region. They cannot afford to let their guard down.
And now let's look at a war that everyone seems to have forgotten about. The war in Sudan. The conflict erupted in the month of April this year. On one side is the ruling military junta led by General Abdel Fattah al-Burhan. He's fighting against his former ally, General Mohammed Hamadan Dagalo, also known as Hemedti. Now, Hemedti leads a paramilitary group called the Rapid Support Forces, or RSF. It's effectively his private army. It boasts over 100,000 troops, 1 lakh troops. Now, these two sides, Sudan's military and the RSF, have been fighting for more than 6 months now. They're fighting over the control of Sudan. A major battleground is the capital, Khartoum. It's been a hotspot since the war began, and that's still the case 6 months on. On Sunday, at least 20 people were killed after a shell struck a popular market. Both factions have Khartoum in the crosshairs, and civilians there are paying the price. But the fighting is not restricted to the capital. It has spread to other parts of the country. And the worst hit region is Darfur. That's in western Sudan. The Darfur region is inhabited by tribal groups. They're distinct from Sudan's Arab majority population, and these people of Darfur have become the targets of ethnic killing. The RSF is rapidly moving across Darfur. 2 weeks ago, they captured the region's largest city. It's called Nyala. And they're now turning their focus to a city called El Geneina. Shelling has forced thousands of people to flee. They're trying to make their way to the neighboring nation of Chad. But along the way, people are being hunted down by armed groups.
Our people there in Admata were killed and displaced. Children are slaughtered, women's money and belongings are robbed, and they can't escape.
They told me that my brother was killed. We don't know where he is. My mother, my sister's children and I, we all came to Chad. We don't know where my father is and we couldn't find him. They burned everything and they took everything. We did not bring anything with us except God and our clothes.
There's been a surge in refugees. We have estimates from the group called Doctors Without Borders. They say about 7,000 people crossed the border into Chad, and this happened in just the first 3 days of this month. 7,000 people in 3 days. Many of these people come with no belongings, just the clothes on their backs and the bullet wounds all over. And it's not just Chad. Thousands have fled to Egypt, Ethiopia, the Central African Republic, and even South Sudan.
Indeed, in addition to thousands of Sudanese fleeing the conflict, more than 353,000 registered returnees and refugees from Sudan have crossed into South Sudan in a country where 2/3 of the population is already in need of humanitarian assistance.
Now, South Sudan gained independence in the year 2011 after a civil war that lasted almost 20 years. It was a devastating conflict. South Sudan is still suffering economically because of it. And now it has to deal with hundreds of thousands of refugees. Overall, 6 million people have been displaced by the war in Sudan in the last 6 months. 1.2 million have left the country. And a refugee crisis is now brewing in neighboring countries.
The situation is dire. We're lacking shelter, we're lacking water, we're lacking food, and all of the UN, the NGO community is coming together, but it's simply not sufficient for the needs. We are so concerned. You're talking about 6 million people that have been displaced, both inside Sudan as well as in all of the neighboring countries, and that because of a conflict that can be stopped.
She says it's a conflict that can be stopped. But does the world care to intervene? Doctors, observers, the people of Sudan, they're all shouting themselves hoarse, asking for something to be done. But as one war erupts after another, the world's attention seems to be moving on. And because of this, the people of Sudan are ignored. They're now the faceless victims of a forgotten conflict. Vantage continues after a short break.
That we had with us to one of the major hospitals within Gaza City, Al-Shifa. These are not conditions under which humanitarians can work and meet the urgently required needs of the civilian population. Humanitarians, hospitals, and civilians must be protected under international humanitarian law.
In the last week, I've had to tell a father that his child has non-survivable burn injuries. We've had to treat with the team patients, young children that have been pulled out of the rubble after 48 hours. Today, we had a patient in theatre for further surgery, extensive surgery she's already had, and had lost 2 children in the attack that wounded her. We're still getting patients every day with very significant injuries that are going to take a long time to heal. We're really running out of things now, dressings, particularly for the burns. We're running out of anaesthetic and analgesic drugs. The staff, both ourselves and the local staff here, are getting very worn out. The living conditions are very basic. There's not much food. Electricity cuts in the evening, difficult and irregular communications. But of course, this is nothing compared to what the people here in Gaza are suffering at this moment.
We can pack it up. I can go.
We're provisionally looking for
Can you do your usual?
Good afternoon, everybody.
It's
shut?
Sure. So our understanding is that given a security circumstance that the Rafah border crossing remains.
Our next story is from Japan. It seems the land of the rising sun is also a land of parting seas. A new island is emerging from the Pacific Ocean thanks to an undersea volcanic eruption. It is creating this new landmass. This is about 1,200 kilometers south of Tokyo. It falls within Japan's territory, near the island of Iwoto, formerly known as Iwo Jima. The volcanic eruption began a few weeks ago, and now Japan has confirmed the formation of a tiny island about 100 meters in diameter. What does it mean for Japan's borders? And what will be the long-term impacts? Our next report has the answers.
Indonesia should watch its back. There's another nation vying for its title, another contender for the moniker Land of 1,000 Islands. Japan. Japan's official number of islands keeps growing. Earlier this year, Japan discovered it had almost double the islands it had previously counted, and now another one's being added to the list. Far to the south of Tokyo, in the middle of the Pacific Ocean, a new island is emerging from the sea. It's being formed as we speak. It's off the coast of Iwoto Island, which was previously called Iwo Jima. There, the planet is giving birth to a new piece of land, in the usual fiery fashion. A volcano is erupting under the Pacific, spewing molten rocks and lava into the sea. What happens when hot lava meets the cold ocean? It hardens into rock. Now, usually, this doesn't mean much. The newly formed rock just settles on the ocean bed. But that's not the case this time. The eruption has been going on for weeks, and the new rock being formed has started to peek out from under the Pacific. The island is presently tiny. It's only about 100 meters in diameter and barely 20 meters above the ocean surface. But even though it's small, it still counts as an island, which brings up Japan's island count, at least for a while. We don't mean to sound pessimistic, but the truth is, not all islands make it. Japan itself has lost some islands in the past. These islands disappear for multiple reasons. One cause is nature's fury. What the earth gives, it can easily take away. It just has to send a tsunami or typhoon the new island's way. The force of these disasters can transform a fledgling island and drag it back under the ocean. But an island's death isn't always so dramatic. Sometimes it's just ordinary waves that do the job. A new island needs time to solidify. Initially, it's composed of ash and volcanic rock fragments mashed together. This isn't the most stable combination, allowing normal waves to whittle away at the unstable landmass, enough to break it apart sometimes. To ensure a long life, the island needs to be given stronger building material, which means lava from a prolonged volcanic explosion. A good supply of lava will cool to form a stronger island. The new island off Iwoto may not get this luxury. The underwater eruption forming it seems to be slowing down already, so the tiny landmass may end up as a temporary addition to Japan. Which brings us to the next question. What happens to a country when it gets a new island? Well, there can be some benefits, especially if the island is further off in the ocean. That means a country like Japan can extend its claimed exclusive economic zone. This zone extends out 370 kilometers from the coast. So, if your coast grows, so does your EEZ. In this particular case, it would mean by about a few dozen meters for Japan, which isn't much. But Japan shouldn't lose hope about expanding naturally. As we mentioned, new Japanese islands keep popping up. The country is situated in a volcano-rich zone, known as the Pacific Ring of Fire. This ring will always keep spewing fiery lava, and in the future it could easily form a solid new landmass, meaning Japan's territory will always keep growing.
Now let's talk about New Delhi, the capital of India, a mega city of over 30 million. People from all across the nation come here looking for better jobs, even better lives. It sounds like a feasible plan, but it should come with a cautionary note. In Delhi, breathing is injurious to health. People are losing years of their lives, 11.9 years to be exact, simply by breathing in Delhi air. It is the same as smoking more than 10 cigarettes a day. A thick blanket of noxious haze has settled over Delhi. It burns eyes and lungs, prompting ardent calls for action. The public frenzy has compelled the state government to act, or at least be seen to act. But amid this heavy smog, one thing is clear as day. Delhi's pollution pangs are doomed because the attempts to resolve them are bogus. Here's how bad the situation is. Delhi's air quality has persisted in the severe category. Today it stands at 423 in the Air Quality Index. That's AQI, Air Quality Index, 423. In some places, it is well above 450. Think of the AQI as a yardstick. It runs from 0 to 500. Anything over 300 is hazardous. Over 400 is extremely risky, and that's where we are, over 400. What's the healthy limit? 0 to 50. So Delhi's air quality is nearly 10 times worse, yet all the efforts to combat pollution are too little and too late. Many are flawed in design and bound to fail. The only concrete step the government has taken so far is to shut down schools. Today they held a meeting and they came up with another plan. Delhi's ministers will personally visit parts of the city to ensure anti-pollution measures are being implemented. Perhaps they want to be seen to be doing something. But what were they doing for the past year or the year before? Not like it's a new problem. Then they want to ban the entry of taxis registered in other states. Not sure when this will be done and how. They've also announced the odd-even scheme. That's basically vehicle rationing to reduce the number of vehicles on the roads. The Supreme Court calls this optics. They'll hear the matter tomorrow. Meanwhile, the government has had another brilliant idea: cloud seeding. Meaning, Delhi will attempt to induce artificial rains. This is a weather modification technique. Artificial rain, much like natural rain, clears the atmosphere. It reduces airborne pollutants. The government is waiting for a proposal for this plan, after which it will approach the Supreme Court, and if the court says yes, they will do it on November 20th or 21st. Why then? Because it is expected to be cloudy on these days. So basically, it may or may not happen. You know what this sounds like? It's like the government forgot to prepare for an annual exam and now it is scrambling to keep up, doing the bare minimum. And it won't work. Delhi's policy is a reaction to public outcry, haphazard moves without a vision, aimed not so much to curb pollution, but to contain the backlash. And it happens every year. A slight drop in temperature and calm winds trap pollution. At the same time, there's stubble burning in neighboring states. They burn paddy straw after the harvest, mostly in Punjab and Haryana. These two states generate 30 million tons of paddy straw every year. Only a small fraction is used. The rest is burnt. More than 1,000 fires are recorded every day. Their smoke travels to Delhi and its neighborhood. It accounts for up to 25% of pollution. But the government would rather shut schools for a week than handle this problem. You see, there is no easy or quick solution to this, which is why it has to be a year-long effort, not a last-ditch one. So why has Delhi failed to do what must be done? Is the government incapable of implementing effective policies? Or is it unwilling? And I don't know which is worse. Either way, this is a failure of leadership. It is killing people, and that is unforgivable. And now it's time for Vantage Shots, images that tell the story. In Gaza, displaced children refuse to let go of their pet cats as they move to refugee camps. In the US, Washington Zoo bid farewell to its beloved trio of giant pandas as they return to China. And an Australian woman surfed her way into record books after she caught a 40-feet-tall wave. Finally, we're taking you back in history. On this day in 1938, Nazi Germany unleashed the Kristallnacht, also known as Night of Broken Glass. Jewish businesses were ransacked, synagogues were torched, Jews were killed, and thousands were sent to concentration camps. More than 100,000 Jews fled Germany after this night. We're leaving you on that note. Thanks for watching. We'll see you tomorrow.
Zerstörungen, Brandstiftungen.
A very good evening. You're watching CNN News 18 with me, Akanksha Swaroop. Now, the ethics panel's meet concluded today after 6 people voted in favour and 4 against in the cash for query scam. Interestingly, Congress's MP Praneet Kaur also voted in favour of this report, and detailed report will now be submitted to Lok Sabha Speaker. Now, the moment the Lok Sabha Speaker approves this report, the government will bring a motion in Lok Sabha on the first day of the winter session of Parliament. Remember, the winter session of the Parliament will be kick-starting on December 4th up till December 22nd. Meanwhile, Congress's MP Vaithilingam has said that Praneet Kaur told him that she is working under pressure and hence voted in favour.
Asking also the 3 questions.
हम लोगों ने अपनी रिपोर्ट, विस्तृत रिपोर्ट लोकसभा स्पीकर को आज इनाद करने के बाद कल सौंप देंगे।
लेकिन जो भी एविडेंसेस हमारे पास सरकार की तरफ से आए हैं, नॉट टेलिंग गुड ऑफ द इश्यूज दैट हैज बीन रेज्ड।
I am of the opinion that if there is credible evidence with regards to corruption, that is for the committee and the speaker to opine on.
मुझे लगता है कि महुआ मोइत्रो is competent enough to fight a battle on her own.
एथिक्स कमेटी का चेयरमैन उन्हीं का है, सीबीआई उन्हीं का है, जिसको जो चाहे वो कर सकते हैं।
So when you delve deeper into calls for Mahua Moitra's expulsion, it's important to break down for you what the findings of the panel were and what the panel has eventually recommended. Let me break them down for you. The panel found that heinous and criminal conduct of an MP, that is what they felt has been done by Mahua Moitra. As far as the panel's recommendation on this aspect is concerned, they're saying that expel Mahua Moitra as the Lok Sabha MP. At the same time, the other finding was that she shared credentials with an unauthorized person, which of course was an illegal act. The panel has recommended that these misdemeanors call for severe punishment. The other panel finding has been that this is an unethical conduct by accepting cash. Remember, the allegations have been that she accepted cash. This has also been the panel's finding. The panel henceforth has recommended that legal and institutional inquiry should be set up by the government, because remember, the panel cannot investigate her for accepting bribe. At the same time, the panel's finding states that there has been a money trail that took place between Mahua Moitra and Darshan Hiranandani. And the last recommendation, and a very crucial one by the panel at the same time, is that the government should probe as part of quid pro quo. As I stated earlier, that this investigation will have to be conducted by the government and not the panel. Now let me also break down for you what happens to Mahua Moitra next. The ethics panel will be giving the recommendations to the Lok Sabha Speaker. As I highlighted earlier, this will happen when the winter session of the Parliament begins in December. The government must bring motion on first day of this winter session, which will begin on December 4th. If Mahua Moitra is found guilty, she will be expelled from the Parliament, and that could be huge ramifications for the MP. Mahua has the right to challenge the expulsion in court. Whether or not she will do so is something yet to be seen. After the report is tabled, the government will set up institutional inquiry. And with that, let me also bring you some important reactions that have come in, beginning with Vinod Sonkar's reaction, who is the chairperson of the ethics panel.
क्या हुआ सर रिपोर्ट अडॉप्ट कैसे हुई?
देखिए, आज का एजेंडा जो था इस रिपोर्ट को अडॉप्ट करने का, विस्तृत रिपोर्ट पहले ही कल सभी सदस्यों को भेजी जा चुकी थी और सबसे उम्मीद की गई है पढ़ के लोग आएंगे